Right, we can have a look at the organisational culture, an introduction to this, and we'll be discussing it in further detail in the class. I think important to start off with by defining, well, what actually is organisational culture, and let us spend, before I carry on with the slide, just a few seconds. What do you think organisational culture is? Some definitions. Well, culture is how organisations do things. Organisational culture, well, it defines a jointly shared description of an organisation from within. Others would say organisational culture is the sum of values and rituals which serve as glue to integrate the members of the organisation. And again, others would say that culture is the organisation's immune system. So it's quite clear that different people have definitions of how they see organisational culture. I've got on this slide here just looking at the levels of corporate culture, and this can actually be analysed at two levels. First of all, you have at the surface level, and at the surface level you have visible artefacts, which include aspects such as manner of dress, patterns of behaviour, physical symbols, organisational ceremonies and office layouts. And visible artefacts are all the things that one can see, hear and observe by watching members of the organisation. All surface level, all visible. Then there's a secondary level, and it's a deeper and less obvious value, an invisible value. And this level, there's values and beliefs which are not actually observable, but they can be discerned from how people explain and justify what they do. Members of the organisation hold some values at a conscious level, and these values can be interpreted from the stories, the language and the symbols which organisation members use to represent them. Some values become so deeply embedded in a culture that members are no longer consciously aware of them, and these basic underlying assumptions and beliefs are the essence of culture and subconsciously guide behaviour and decisions. In some organisations, for example, a basic assumption might be that people are essentially lazy and will shirk their duties whenever possible, so employees will be closely supervised, given little freedom, and colleagues are frequently suspicious of one another. Perhaps in a more enlightened organisation, they operate on the basic assumption that people want to do a good job. And in these organisations, employees are given more freedom and responsibility, and colleagues trust one another and work much more cooperatively. If we think about how an organisation's activities might be influenced, well, they may actually be influenced informally through its culture, or formally through its design or culture. And I think for managers, culture and design are important as they impact on the effectiveness and the efficiency of the organisation. It's really about the capacity to implement strategy. It's about how organisations work together. And it's about how organisations might work with other organisations. If we were to consider the components of an organisational culture, many organisations exist on continuums. So what actually does a continuum mean? Well, a continuum means something that changes in character gradually or in very slight stages without any clear dividing points. It changes gradually. So you may have things which are rule-based or sensitive to particular peculiarities within the organisation. It may be the individuals or the teams or the communities. It could be objectivity or emotionally. It could be through task-focused interactions or whole-person relationships. And it could be achievement-based or it could be status-based. So these are all sort of the components of the organisational culture. If we turned to the organisational design, well, the organisational design is related to the organisational culture. And you could say that the object of organisational design is to create a structure which fits with its objectives, its resources and its environments. And it's also the relationship between different parts of the organisation and the people in it. We'll be talking more about organisational culture in the lecture next week, and in particular we'll be looking at Charles Handy's power culture. So it might be useful for you to actually begin to find out some information about that before we meet in class.